our live Q&A with Pastor Darren today. We're gonna get going here in a minute or so. We're just gonna wait for people to jump on because we're right on time. We're actually 1 minute early. You're welcome. That's Broadway church style right there. We're 1 minute early. So we're glad that you're here joining us today. You're free to ask whatever questions that you want. On your screen, you'll see there's a Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom tab there. If you click that Q&A button, you can write the questions out, and those questions will actually come to me. And so I'll go through the questions, and we'll have a dialogue here with Pastor Darren. So you can ask. I would actually, if you have a question now, get it out there, and then throughout our time together, if you have more questions, feel free to keep chiming in, because we want this to be an authentic conversation here. And so, Darren, you got one compliment already in the inbox. Thank you for the great sermon from Stephen.
Appreciate that, Stephen.
Yeah, you did do a great job in the sermon, and it's a tricky, well, not tricky. It's
pretty straightforward.
It's an awkward thing to talk about, because there's people have so many views on what you spoke about today.
And we all know people in all situations and people we love, and some people find it can come across as offensive or judgmental in some ways, like we're looking down on certain relationships or something, but we're laying out God's ideal and the scriptural ideal, and it's pretty straightforward. And so if people have discussions and pushback, and I'm sure they do, we'll hopefully clarify them. But for the most part, you're arguing with God, not with me. And that's what makes this very comfortable right now for me.
Yeah. And the great part about this Q&A, and we're going to go for about half an hour here, up to half an hour anyways, is you do get to push back a little bit and say, what about this? Yeah.
You're welcome to do that.
Yeah. So here's a question for you that's come in. Can you remarry after a divorce?
Can you remarry after a divorce? Yes, you can, depending on the circumstances. In fact, this fall, we're going to be doing a entire 6 or 7 week series starting in September, answering a lot of these questions. What's the biblical design for marriage? What to look, are you the marrying kind? Because Scripture teaches, ideally, Paul says, if you can stay single, stay single. That's the ideal. So a lot of people think marriage is the ideal, but according to the Apostle Paul, singleness is the ideal. But he says, if you can't control yourself, and he's speaking sexually, he says, then get married. And then, so we're going to talk about, is marriage right for you? Then we're going to talk about what to look for in a marriage partner. We're going to talk about how to, build a strong marriage. We're going to talk about how to rescue a dying marriage. And then we're going to talk about what are your options after a marriage has failed. And so I say all that to say that we're going to be talking about this more in depth in September and October. But the bottom line is that, yes, there are biblical options, as I understand it. If you're, like we learned today, if your spouse leaves you, the Apostle Paul says you're not bound in such a case. Don't chase after them, in other words. Let them go. And now there is some debate regarding what not bound means. As I understand it, not bound means you're no longer tied to that person, meaning that you would be free to remarry. But as I would understand it, only after that individual has had other sexual relationships, in which case, strictly speaking, adultery would have kicked in. And you would then be free to remarry because the person has committed adultery against your previous marriage relationship, which would set you free. So, or if the reason why you're separated or divorced is because of adultery on your partner's place, as I understand Scripture, that would make you free to remarry as well. So the answer is yes, under certain circumstances, if after you've divorced, can you remarry? Yes. If adultery has been at play in your previous relationship, then as I understand Scripture, you're free to remarry.
There's a couple questions that came in on the topic of a Christian marrying or being in a relationship with a new believer. Okay, so that's the context of these questions here. So if the woman is a committed Christian and she's interested in a man who is a new believer, how long should she wait before dating or marrying him?
Biblically, I have no advice biblically. So this would just be personally, I suppose. Um, Maybe a principle that one could draw from would be leadership in the New Testament. It says, you shouldn't appoint someone to be a leader in a congregation if they are a new believer. So there is an element where maturity should be factored in before appointing someone as a leader. I don't know if that's a parallel when it comes to marriage. I think you as an individual would have to be comfortable that the person is firm in their faith, meaning that they have not just done this as a way of following you, that they're following Christ, not following you. So I suppose you would have to be comfortable that they actually have roots. They've put down roots in their faith, and there's someone that is strong enough to stand with you. So when you get right down to this, I mean, this has nothing to do with me. This has nothing to do with the church per se. This is about you. I'm wanting you as an individual to be in a strong, healthy marriage with another Christ follower. And so you have to sort of discern in your own heart with your own relationships, your own common sense, whether or not you think this individual is strong enough in their faith that they are going to continue, that this isn't something they're just test driving, but this is something that they truly believe with their whole heart. And if you believe that, then I would say, you're free to pursue this relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Here's another one. And this is a great question. How do I talk to a friend or family member who's a Christian but is in a relationship with an unbeliever and doesn't see a problem with it?
If they're a Christ follower and they're in a relationship with an unbeliever and they don't see a problem with it, then I guess that they're biblically, I'm going to use the word ignorant. I don't mean that in a rude way. I mean, they're biblically naive. I would encourage them to sit down with you and watch the teaching that we just gave. Maybe they think it's more just a recommendation or more just an option. Now, I can understand someone who is a Christ follower dating someone or having, a brief or an early relationship with someone who is an unbeliever, hoping maybe, the missionary dating, hoping that maybe they can influence them and so on. I can understand that and saying, yeah, I know I shouldn't marry this person and I won't marry them if they don't become a believer, but, we're just in early stages of a relationship. I can understand that. As unwise as that might even be in the long run, I can understand that, but I can't understand someone saying, I'm a Christ follower, they're not, I know they're not, and I don't have a problem with it. That would make me actually question either one of two things. It would make me question your biblical literacy, or it would make me question your faith. If you're biblically literate, meaning you know it's wrong and you still don't care, then that's just outright rebellion. And that would make me question, are you really a Christ follower? And I think maybe you should question that as well.
I think you kind of talked about it a little bit today when you mentioned guarding your heart. Just to really guard who you let come close and who you get in a relationship with. I know from my perspective, I've worked a lot with the next generation, youth and young adults, and I've seen more people leave the faith because of a Christian dating a Christian youth or young adult leaving the faith because they dated a non-Christian person than any other reason out there. That's the biggest one for me that I've seen. And so it's huge because it's like yoking yourself with that other person.
It's true. And it's in the long run, it's very short-sighted and it's very selfish. That's what we tried to communicate in today's teaching. And that is, think about your children that you might have someday. What I taught all of our children, who are all adults now, but I always said, when you're choosing a partner, realize you are choosing your child's wife, your child's wife. You're choosing your child's mother or your child's father. So you're not just choosing someone to have fun with for a couple years. You are choosing your child's parent for the rest of that child's life. The person you chose is their father or their mother. That's a pretty serious role that you're playing. So be very careful how you choose.
In the same vein, there's another question came in. Should I try to convert my girlfriend?
You should try to convert everyone. Listen, no, first of all, the challenge here is that there is no parallel in scripture to what we call dating. Dating isn't in the Bible. They didn't date in the first century culture and even ancient culture. They were arranged marriages for the most part, or it was simply, when you were engaged, which was equal to marriage. So basically, so there was no relationship where let's have some fun, let's test drive ourselves emotionally, mentally, physically. Let's see if we're compatible, and let's kind of interact with each other at various levels of depth, and then we'll build into a marriage. That whole concept is not in the Bible, so we're not going to find that parallel or any such advice. So what I'm saying is to this individual is, if you are, don't date someone that you wouldn't marry, right? So if you can think of that principle, if you wouldn't marry this person, or if they're, as we discussed today, if they're biblically unmarriable as a Christ follower, then don't date them. But so I guess what I'm saying to this person is, I think you should, if you have this friend who's a female and you have influence upon her, by all means, try and share your faith with her. But guard your heart, as Proverbs says, guard your heart very carefully about the level of attachment that you'll have with her life.
Mm-hmm. Here's another one. So this one, I think it's coming at us from like a parent figure or maybe a mentor, speaking to two younger people who are dating each other. How would you respond if two young people say to you that they love each other, they believe God exists, but their faith is to believe in each other?
Okay, so they're not Christ followers. So we're dealing with two individuals who are not followers of Jesus. And I don't doubt that they love each other. Don't doubt that at all. But their faith is in each other. It's a very limited faith. It's a very shallow faith, in the sense that yes, I have faith in my wife. My wife has faith in me, in the sense that we trust each other. But if that is the ultimate source of your faith, is that, is your spouse the answer to the question, who created the universe? Is your spouse the answer to the question, what will happen to you after you die? Is your spouse the answer to the question, what is the source of ultimate morality in your life? I mean, so that sounds very romantic. It sounds like something Tom Cruise would say to Meryl Streep or whatever in a movie. Not that I'd ever want to see those two together in a movie, but that sounds very Hollywoodish, but it's not livable. It's romantic. It's just not real.
Yeah, it sounds like their worldview is built on a house of cards there.
Yeah, sadly.
Here's one. They said, kind of off topic, but it's not really. What are your thoughts on marrying without the intentions of having kids?
My personal opinion, again, I don't really have an issue with it. Some would. I don't think procreation is the main reason for marriage. There are individuals who, for various reasons, cultural reasons, physical reasons, either choose not to or cannot have children. Their marriages are no less valid and no less biblical. So I can understand there are people who look in the world around us and say, I'm not comfortable bringing a child into this culture, into this world right now. I can actually understand that fear. So I would not stand in judgment over them. I would encourage them maybe to think about it a little more. And often couples go into a marriage thinking that way, and a couple of years later change their mind. So I wouldn't try to talk them out of it, but I would talk to them about it.
Yeah. Um, here's another one. A relationship between two Christians is also not guaranteed to be risk-free. That's true.
True, very true.
Many Christian couples still get divorced and have marital issues. I would say all have marital issues to some point.
Yeah, yeah.
So the question is this. So why is there a requirement for your spouse to be a follower of Christ?
Well, it's because what we talked about earlier. I mean, it's what the Bible teaches. The requirement is because you're moving in the same direction. Your hearts are pursuing the same goal. You have the same ultimate value at your core. Now, the fact that two people who share the same core values can have breakdown, okay, but that's not an argument against having the same core values as someone else. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a whenever I perform a marriage ceremony, I often quote from 1 Corinthians, where it talks about love is patient, love is kind, and so on. And then at the end, the Apostle Paul says, "Love never fails." And I quote that in a marriage ceremony, and then I pause, and I often say, "Now you may be here and you're listening, and you're thinking to yourself, I know of a situation where love has failed." And what I point out is I say, no, you don't know of a situation where love has failed. You know of a situation where people have failed to love. If you love one another, you will never fail. So two couples, two individuals who both serve Christ, who both honor God and want to follow Christ, if they live according to their vows, if they live what they claim to be at their hearts, if they live in obedience to Christ, they will not fail. But two Christ followers who don't love, where sin comes in and corrodes, yes, there will be failure because they will fail to love. Now, that's not an argument against two Christians marrying. That's an argument against backsliding. You know, that's what that is. So I just don't. I don't think I understand the argument this individual would be making. Why should two Christ followers get married? Because they have the same goals, ultimately the same core values. They're heading in the same direction at their very cores. Where that breaks down is if one or both of them changes the direction, walks away from what they claim to be their core values. So, but then then you're into the area of a believer with a non-believer, or two unbelievers, which is a whole different discussion than what we're talking about today. So the bottom line is two Christ followers should marry because you have the same core values, the same ultimate direction, the same ultimate goal in your life. And 9 times out of 10, that is going to bode well for your relationship. Those 1 out of 10 times when one or more of them walk away from that, that's the exception. That's not the rule.
And just to add on that, we brought in we've done marriage courses and stuff at our church, and the guy we brought in, I'm having a brain cramp right now.
Dave Curry.
Dave Curry, thank you. He preached one Sunday at Broadway, and he was debunking. He's like, I want to debunk the idea that 50% of marriages end in divorce. He said,
right.
in my practice, and he has a practice, he said 98 or 99% of Christian couples who pray together regularly stay together. Yeah. And that goes to what you're saying, that they're both going in the same direction. I've never heard that before. He's like, trust me, this is what I do full time.
Yeah, and so he's a professional marriage counselor. Yeah,
he totally debunked that for me.
Yeah.
So hopefully that answers a bit of that question there. Here's another one. Should you live with your partner? This is a 2-parter. Should you live with your partner before you are married? And the reasoning behind it is, isn't it wise to live together in order to kind of test drive the person if you're going to marry them?
Right. Going back to statistics, statistically, couples that live together have a higher breakup rate or a lower success rate than couples who don't live together. Now think about that. Couples who live together beforehand have a higher failure rate than couples who don't live together. This whole idea of test driving, I've had people say to me, I need to find out if we're sexually compatible. Mm. And what I've always said, if your parts work and her parts work, trust me, you're sexually compatible. Mm. It's not rocket science. And so this whole, concept of, compatibility and so on. Yeah, you can find out if somebody's compatible as you're growing and building your relationship. But I think why people who live together have a higher failure rate than people who get married is because even when you're living together and you're not married yet, you're not truly your authentic self. You're still knowing that this is not real yet, that you're not truly committed yet. And so you're really not truly knowing who the other person is, because they're not truly being their authentic selves, because they know that they're still being, watched or critiqued, or, they're still on the lot. You haven't signed off on the deed yet. You haven't bought the car yet. So they know they're still being a test drive, as it was phrased in the question. A test drive isn't reality. A test drive, you still got the guy with you sitting in the passenger seat, and he's telling you all the best things about this vehicle, and he's not showing you the paint chicks and telling you about the failure and the muffler and so on. They knows about. He's hiding stuff. And test drives are not reality. We all know that. Anybody who's bought a car knows that.
Mm-hmm. This question, I think, is piggybacking off of kind of when you said the Bible doesn't specifically talk about dating, because in the ancient Near East and first century, that wasn't a thing. And so in the Christian faith, can a woman initiate and express her interest in a guy first?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, no, I don't have a problem with that at all.
Yeah, so because you were talking about just culturally, that's what the culture.
Yeah.
And so it's not the fact that culture shifted in that sense, it's not wrong.
Yeah. As we said, male and female, they're equal yet distinct. So absolutely, no problem.
This person asked, different Christians have different levels of faith and ways of interpreting their levels of faith. How do you know that two Christians are heading in the same direction in a relationship?
Well, that's what communication's about, I suppose. But you see little hints, early on in relationships, little inconsistencies. So you can, it's like if there's a circle here, let's say my nose is the center of the circle, my face is the circle, and as the line's extending out, you can, a little bit of movement here is going to, be a bigger movement at the end of the circle. So whatever little bit of stuff you're seeing happening now, realize that as time goes on, that's going to increase, and that vector is the delta is going to increase. Mm-hmm. So all I'm saying is watch for things now, and because what you're seeing now will likely continue and may even increase exponentially. So here's a key principle. You don't marry someone for who you think they will be, or you think you can make them. You have to marry someone for who they are right now. So if you're not satisfied with them, if they never changed at all from how they are right now, and you're not satisfied, don't marry them. Because you can count on that, chances are those little foibles and issues that you have with them now are probably going to get bigger. Mm-hmm. You can't count that they're going to be fixed or changed. So look at what they're doing now, look at their patterns, whether it be honesty or dependability or whatever. And if you're not comfortable with them now, don't think you're going to change them. If you're not comfortable now, don't marry them.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple questions on this vein here, and I think we've talked about it already a bit, but again, I just want you to reinforce it.
Sure.
Basically, two people got married and they were Christians, and then one person started veering off and not serving God, and basically fell off the path and is not a believer anymore. Does the Christian, what should they do, or what can they do biblically? Do they have to stay with this person that's veering off for the rest of their life, because clearly now they're not going in the same direction? So there's a couple questions kind of along that.
Yeah. The principle that the Apostle Paul outlined that we cited today from Corinthians would then apply. You would then essentially, your spouse, though they were once a believer, have now renounced their faith or walked away from their faith, in which case they are now an unbeliever. And so the principle applies which the Apostle Paul applied, which he outlined, and that is, if they're willing to live with you, you can't divorce them. Don't divorce them. Now, there should be some caveats here, and we'll talk about this fall. If you're in an abusive situation, if you feel your life or your children's lives are in danger or something, of course, that's a given. But Paul's talking about all things being equal. If they're willing to live with you and you're not in danger or harm's way, then he says, don't divorce them. But if they leave you, don't chase after them, let them go. You're not bound in such instances. So the principle of a believer and an unbeliever would apply to two believers where one of the believers has fallen away. I think that same principle would apply.
Can you expand a little bit on what protecting your heart means, or even looks like? There's a question about that, because we talked about in the sermon, we kind of talked about it a little bit here. What does that practically look like for a young person or a single person, doesn't matter what age, before they get into a relationship?
Yeah, guarding your heart would mean not. I have a phrase, you've probably heard me say it many times, Lewis, don't bleed in front of sharks. Meaning, guard your level of vulnerability in front of people that are probably not trustworthy or not dependable. So that's one way you guard your heart. You just guard your level of transparency until someone has shown themselves to be trustworthy. So don't bleed in front of sharks, people who are looking for a way to harm you with your level of transparency. Another way to guard your heart, I think, and this is the key one, would be to protect your level of intimacy, particularly physical intimacy. Because when it comes to human sexuality, there's something that happens holistically to us, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. What Jesus quoted from Genesis, the man will leave his father and mother, be united, literally, kaleo, glued to his wife, they become one flesh. And so there is a unity, there's something, sex is the physically most intimate thing that can be done. It unites two people. That's what Jesus said. That's what Genesis says. It glues two people together. And so there's a bonding that takes place. And as we've used in illustration and other sermons in the past talking about this, it's not Post-it note glue, it's crazy glue. It's gorilla glue. It's glue that sticks and works like this. It's not Post-it note where, oh, stick here, pull away, stick here, pull it away. No, it ties two people together. And so every time you have a sexual relationship with an individual, you are gluing yourself spiritually, mentally, emotionally to that individual. And when you pull away, it damages you, it damages them, because there's a part of you that stays with them, there's a part of them that stays with you, and it damages you. So guard your heart, guard your emotions, guard your relationships, guard your intimacy. Don't share that with someone who is not committed to you. They're not bound to you. And by the way, let me say this. Over the years as well, I've had many people say to me, Lewis, what's a marriage document? What's a marriage contract? It's just a piece of paper. And I always say, well, if it's just a piece of paper, sign it. What's the big deal? If it's just a piece of paper, then sign it. And they don't sign it. Why? Because they know it's more than just a piece of paper. That's silly, though. That's like saying, what's a mortgage? It's just a piece of paper, right? What's any other contract? What's an agreement to buy a car? It's just a piece of paper. Well, sign it then. We all know it's a piece of paper that has declarations on it that bind you legally to an individual, that have repercussions. It's a commitment. That's what it is. And if a person is not willing to sign a marriage contract, then they say they're not willing to commit. And to me, that's not just a red flag. That's a siren screaming at you, stay away from this person. If they're not willing to sign a piece of paper, then they're saying to you, I'm not prepared to commit myself to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you need to hear?
That's huge, because I've heard that excuse a number of times as well, and people can use it as an excuse, like just kind of slough it off. But
Yeah,
like you
yeah.
said, that siren should be going off in your mind.
Oh my goodness, absolutely.
What does the Apostle Paul have to say about online dating? I added the Apostle Paul part, but
as I said, there's no offline dating, online dating. There was no dating at all in the New Testament period. It's a completely foreign concept to the Bible.
Mhm. But specific, give us your opinion on online dating. Is it right? Is it wrong? Can someone do that, in your opinion?
Yeah, I've met a lot of people who have met their spouses online. I think it's a great option for an individual to at least find out. I think it's a healthy, practical first step anyway, to interact with an individual, to get into their mind, to find out what they think without feeling the pressure of a physical presence, the pressure to appear to be someone they're not physically. Now I understand that who people present, how they present themselves online, and how they actually are in person are often two different things. I get that. I understand that. But having said that, it is a great way to ask questions, to explore a person's points of view on so many areas. It's like and then the next level would be great to have a phone call conversation, to hear their voice, to hear how they express themselves. So I think online dating personally is a very practical and realistic way to meet people and to take that first step.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. We took our time. We took our 30 minutes, or that kind of flew by there.
Wow.
I do have one comment. Nobody can see this, but in my inbox here, there's an anonymous person that had a question about a person W and person M. We couldn't get to that. It was a longer question. So whoever said that, please email Darren directly at darrenl@broadwaychurch.com, and I'm sure he'd love to walk you through that scenario. So I couldn't get to that question, but some great questions here. And again, Darren, thanks for hitting it head on. Tell us what you're talking about this upcoming Sunday.
So a week today, we're talking about, the question is, so what's healing all about? So, how does healing work, I think was the question. And particularly, what about, when you pray for healing and it doesn't seem to happen? Is healing still for today? Is it sort of a hit and miss thing? Is healing just a physical thing, or is it a spiritual realm as well? We're going to do our best to answer all these questions, some truth about healing next week.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Darren, and thank you all for logging on here, and we'll see you next Sunday, 1:15 p.m.
God bless you, folks. Thanks for being here.